All right, hello. Well, it's happened again. We've got to the last session of another SSP. This session will be the karaoke session. No, I'm just kidding. So this is lessons learned in scholarly publishing. It will actually take the form of word problems for each of our panelists. We have assembled an illustrious panel here that will, after the word problems, share their wit and wisdom and regarding some of the challenges and opportunities and things they've learned in their careers thus far. We have with us Angela Cochran, who's Director of Journals at the American Society for Civil Engineers, down at the end. Next to her, we have Ken Heideman, Director of Publications at the American Meteorological Society, who arranged for the lovely weather this week. Thank you very much, Ken. Next to Ken, we have Nancy Rodnan, Senior Director of Publications at the Endocrine Society. And next to her, we have Brandon Norden, Vice President, Marketing, Sales, and Web Development at the American Chemical Society. You'll have to tell us how those three things came together. We have Robert Harrington, Associate Executive Director of Publishing at the American Mathematical Society. And finally, we have Steve Welch, Senior Vice President and Publisher, American College of Chest Physicians. The format here will be I will ask some questions, and we're going to go through, and then we'll open it up for any questions that might come from the floor. Priority will be given to detailed trivia questions, as well as any math problems. But before we get into the Q&A, we've asked each panelist to very briefly tell us just a very little bit about their organizations and their publishing programs, just to sort of help orient the audience and myself to their organizations and their perspective. So why don't we start at this end with Mr. Welch.
All right. Thank you. Steve Welch. I'm the publisher for the American College of Chest Physicians. We're a clinical medical society, primarily pulmonary and critical care professionals. We publish the journal Chest. We also publish some books, including a self-assessment exam that has a very successful iOS and Android app. We do some board review books and coding and reimbursement book and myriad other things. Founded in 1935. We've been self-published until this year. We've chosen to move to Elsevier in 2016 and have them publish our journal. So we've been willing. So I'm looking forward to talking today.
Hi there. I'm Robert Harrington, and I'm going to try and be brief because it's very hard for me to be brief. So American Mathematical Society was actually founded a long time ago, in 1888. I was born in 1889, so it's just after. We have about 570 institutional members, 30,000 individual members or so, declining slightly. About 210 staff spread across Providence, with headquarters Ann Arbor, Michigan, where we have the Discovery Gateway database, MathSciNet, which is a large part of what we do, and in Washington, D.C. as well. We have 2 staff there. We're about a $28 million operation. We have, which is a nice thing to have, actually. We have about $125 million sitting in the bank. Investments and stuff. We have about 25 journals, 3,000 books in print, about a front list of 85 books a year, and of course MathSciNet that I mentioned. We have all sorts of quirks to what we do. We have ebook collections. We make our journals online. They're freely available online after 5 years. We founded along with SIAM, and I see David Marshall over there, of SIAM and Design Science, now with the sort of managing partner, I guess, of MathJax, which I can explain more about later, but it's a very cool rendering engine for mathematics. At least I think it's cool. So there's a bunch of other stuff, which I won't get into, but in our books, we really publish right the way across from the researcher down now to for children as well. So that's me, and us, I should say.
Hello, I'm Brandon Nordine. I'm the Senior Vice President for Sales, Marketing, and Digital Strategy, which maybe makes it a little bit more sensible. It does mean we'll also be accepting our subscriptions in Bitcoin this year. So ACS Publications is a division of the world's largest scientific scholarly society. We publish 47, soon to be 49 journals, about 40,000 articles a year. We have a small ebook operation, which we actually jointly publish with OUP. They do the print derivative. We have the digital original. We are self-published, distributing electronically on the Adapon platform.
I'm Nancy Rodnan, and I'm with the Endocrine Society, and we have 5 scientific publications, journals, and we cover clinical as well as the basic science and the translational sciences. We also have a member magazine, and we just recently partnered our books program with Wiley, so that's where we are right now.
Hi, I'm Ken Heideman, Director of Publications with the American Meteorological Society, which was founded in 1919, so we're very close to our centennial celebration. We're planning for that already. We have roughly 100 staff. Most of that staff is in Boston, Mass., and we also have 16 or so folks in Washington, D.C. And that staff services around, the 100 staff services around 14,000 members. As far as publishing goes, we have 11 scholarly peer-reviewed journals in meteorology, oceanography, hydrology, and related sciences. We're self-published. Our journals are all, except for one, are all online and print. The other one is just online only. And we have a small but really solid book program. We publish roughly 4 to 5 titles per year, and we have about 100 books on our backlist.
Kudos to all of you for being here so late today. Thank you. My name is Angela Cochran, and I'm the Journals Director at the American Society of Civil Engineers, just down the road in Reston, Virginia. We are the oldest and largest civil engineering organization. We publish 35 journals, about 60 to 70 books per year, and standards. We have about 140,000 members, most of which are practitioners, and that's basically the size of us.
Thank you. Okay, so our first question for our esteemed panelists. What accomplishments are you most proud of, or what issue or problem, not including math problems, except for Mr. Harrington, did you solve that worked particularly well? So what accomplishment are you most proud of, or what issue or problem did you solve that worked particularly well? We can start anywhere. Why don't we start again with Steve? And then we'll mix it up and we'll go the opposite.
I knew I shouldn't have said on the end. I think for us, it's not it's the app that we've developed for the iOS and the Android platform. So we have this self-assessment product that's called ACCP Seek. And now it's called Chest Seek because we've rebranded everything to Chest because it's easy to remember and easy to repeat. Except for me, because we've worked there for 20 years and I can't get ACCP out of my head. But anyway, so we've developed this. We saw this in 2008. We decided to develop an app based around a self-study product, and we launched it for the iPhone, which was a fairly new device back in those old days. And and it was immediately a pretty rousing failure. We had almost no purchasing. We got feedback from people saying we priced it too expensive. Our leadership wanted to kill it, and we stayed the course. We dropped the price. We added to it, we added pulmonary critical care and sleep modules to it. We've now got a library of almost 2,000 exam questions, and this year we'll probably generate revenue of over $250,000 from the app. It frequently grosses as the top-selling medical app in the iTunes store, and we're extremely proud of it. And I think that's, the fortunate thing of getting in on the ground floor of a new technology that delivered information to people was a very exciting project and a lot of fun. But it had a lot of bumps along the way too, and we had to deal with pricing issues and delivery issues and platform issues and the fact that apps are constantly upgraded and you have to handle all those things. So it's turned out pretty well.
Thanks. I'm going to mention a couple of things, though. The first thing I wanted to say is because we're the AMS, and Ken over here is also the AMS, major success is we got AMS.org. Yes. All right, moving right along. I think there are a couple of different extremes. One, I've only been at AMS for 2 years now, so I can't really claim credit for anything much. But some of the major things, MathJax, I think, really counts. It's a collaborative exercise. It's really the most amazing example that I've seen of open source innovation that's been funded by society work, and it's ongoing. It's got many of you are sponsors and partners of MathJax and are utilizing MathJax. We have an Alfred P. Sloan Foundation grant to investigate semantic enrichment in the mathematical sciences. And it really is it's sort of simple in some ways. It's a JavaScript engine for rendering math on the fly. So you can use math not just as images, static, but you can manipulate it on devices. So that's really been a great success, an ongoing success, something that I sit on the steering committee for. And it's just a pleasure to be involved with it. So that's one example of success. A more recent, sort of, in some ways, much smaller success, but it relates to some of the themes we heard this morning from Jenny Lawton, of sort of just sticking your neck out a bit. So we're thinking about how to bring along the next generation of mathematicians. Kids, don't be afraid of math. And so we thought, well, let's try doing some children's book publishing. So in fact, we have this book called Really Big Numbers. Takes you from small numbers up to Googleplex. And it's just a fabulous book. In fact, I actually gave the PDF of this book to my son's 4th grade teacher. And they did a class on it saying, should Hugo's dad publish this book? And they all said yes. So that was just one data point. But anyway, and it was a real success. It actually won the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute and the Children's Book Council basically funded a prize at the National Math Festival, in this first National Math Festival, and this book won the 3rd to 5th grade and the 6th to 9th grade prize. The author got to go to the White House, met John Holdren. I didn't, actually, but anyway, so that's it. Those are the two things. Plenty of other things, too.
Well, I think from my perspective at ACS, and I'd probably say my perspective as just an observer of this industry, I think managing the print-to-digital transition has, we've done it better in terms of media type than almost any of our other media out there. I think, we in many cases, print-to-digital for scholarly publishing has been a growth accelerator as opposed to a negatively disruptive force. At ACS, we started in the digital business long before I got there. But like many of us, we experimented a lot, everything from CDs to websites to various different sort of relatively transient formats. But I think in 2006 to 2009, we sort of really got serious. We declared the e-version of the journal, the version of record, and all new journals after 2008 were printed or were actually available only in e-only format. We introduced a born digital pricing system and access model, consequently enabled us to more than double our subscription base. We drove end-to-end efficiencies through digitization in our submission and production processes that dramatically shrunk our time to market, both for launching new journals as well as for the path of an article from submission to publication. We acted very decisively to cut the costs of supporting the print format. And somewhat controversially, we cut our member benefit for print and just basically stopped supporting that and stopped supporting that in the middle of this is in 2008-9 in the worst of the financial crisis. But that really got us out of a business that was a serious drag on our bottom line. We licensed our Asian print, which is still fairly healthy, to a local printer and digital printer in Asia, which got us out of worrying about everything from postage costs to having to deal with missing issues and fraud, et cetera. We did, at the time seemed radical, a reduced and condensed format where all our print subscriptions now are basically serviced 2-up, recognizing that most print journals actually still just sort of slot into a library shelf and actually don't get used. But we were inspired by actually seeing students in the library photocopying them this way. So we figured that was, for people that were still taking them home 2-up, it made a lot of sense. But it basically, in addition to sort of getting into and finding that digital printing was, had got to a point where you could do away with setup costs and you were basically was a first copy neutral, it also got us into the benefits of inventory-less printing or inventory-less publishing. We've been able to plow the digital dividend from those cost savings into product development, and that's allowed us to increase our title count by 50% in 5 years. And through the expanded discovery and subscription access and OA programs, we've increased the usage of this still very sophisticated and tightly focused corpus to about 100 million downloads a year. So I think over a 5 to 6 year period has been absolutely transformational for ACS.
Well, I would say transitioning from print to online only and only having the author calling and asking for a print copy is the only one we heard from, so I figured that went pretty well. But the main thing that I think that my biggest store accomplishment is working with people and the human factor and assessing staff and what the current needs of the society and the department are, and working with that group and making sure, honing in the staff and figuring out what technology and needs you have and properly hiring people. I think everybody has something special to offer to really get to know the people in your department and in your society. I think that's really a major part of being successful.
Robert.
Hello, Ken.
We're not bitter about the fact that you have the AMS domain. It doesn't bother us that we have to say ametsoc.org or that's AMETSO, yes, ETSOC.org. We're not, but we've gotten past that. I'll just say one thing, that everybody talks about the weather and not everybody talks about math. So one of the things, we're proud of a lot of things, and I actually wasn't on this, I was going to mention it at some point, but Nancy hit the nail on the head, that it comes down to people, and I think that we've hired really well, and that hiring is such it's a really high stakes thing, because when you hire the right people, it's the gift that keeps on giving. And you can't bat 1,000 with that. Occasionally there's going to be somebody you hire that doesn't work out. But you really need to be very, very successful at doing that. When you are, it's just incredible, and my staff is an example of that. So one of the things we're most proud of is that since 2008, we've reduced the production time, which is the time between the acceptance of the peer-reviewed paper to publication, by almost 2/3. But while maintaining the quality of the journals, So, and it took a long time for us to finally, you know, it was a couple days at a time and over a while, and then it was a steep decline. We're very proud about that. Another accomplishment we're proud of is the consolidation of our editorial support. There was a time probably about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, we had 37 what we call EAs, editorial assistants, over 35 states and 2 countries. And now we have 8 of them, and they support more than double the number of editors that the 37 did before. So we think that that's been extremely successful. We're also proud of our book program, which I mentioned was like sort of a little engine that could. In 2005, we couldn't even call it a book program. It was kind of a shambles. And then getting back to hiring, I made a key hire of Sarah Jane Shangra, who's our managing books editor at that time, and she's built a really great program, so we're proud of that as well. And the last thing I'll say at this point is, for a long time we felt as a society that we had to kind of do everything ourselves, including having our own manuscript tracking system, developing it, designing it, all of those things. And the first step toward really major outsourcing was our partnering with ARIES on manuscript tracking, and that has been amazingly successful. But beyond that, it's taught the whole society that it's okay sometimes to outsource. You don't have to do everything yourself. And sometimes if you partner with a business whose only business is a certain function, that's a better way to go.
Thanks, Ken. I'm going to talk about people too, but I'm going to talk about our volunteers. Our 35 editors are all volunteers. They don't get paid. And our editorial boards are all volunteers. And in total, across the 35 journals, there's a little over 800 of them. And until really it's been within the last 5 years or so that we have actively engaged with these very important volunteers of our organization. So of course our journals program is very important to the society, particularly from a financial standpoint. And really engaging with our editors, asking them their opinions on things, showing up to their editorial board meetings, putting things on their agenda for their editorial board meetings has really, I think, transformed our entire journals program. They come to a meeting at our home office every November for our editors, our annual editors workshop. We used to get maybe 12 or 13 editors there, and last year we had 27. So they feel good about it. They feel good about us. They feel like we know what we're talking about when it comes to journal publishing. That when they say, I heard something in the faculty lounge about some big scandal with some fake reviews, and I can say, yes, let me explain what happened to you, or what happened there, and what we do to make sure that that's not going to happen here. Or, boy, we're lucky it wasn't us, and let's talk more about this. The fact that we can talk to them, we come to these kinds of meetings and make sure that everyone on the staff can answer their questions. They can talk about cross-check. They can talk about ethics. They can talk about COPE. They can talk about all the different ways that we're involved with learning about what the standards are of how you really run a professional journals program. And the same thing has been happening on the book side, too. There's another person who's our director of books, and her team have really gone out to talk to these committees who are creating the content to say, don't just plop the manuscripts on our desk when you're done. Let's talk about what makes sense for your book. You know, are you doing updates? Are there color figures that we need to take into consideration? Are there, is there technology? Are there videos? Is there software that can be included? And so I think the biggest thing that's really sort of elevated the content as well as the success of our programs has been to really engage with those content creators and those volunteer editors to make sure that they feel supported, they feel good about the work that they do with us, and they have confidence in us that, you know, we're the publisher, we know what we're talking about. We get a lot less friction that way too.
Fantastic. So engage with your members and volunteers, hire the right people, have the right strategy for managing the transition to digital, and most importantly, make sure you register your domains early. So from what's gone well to what's not gone as well, what was there anything you felt you failed at, to use the F word, or that didn't go as planned, or and most importantly, what did you learn from that experience? So we're going to start at the far end with Angela and go work back this way.
So things that didn't go quite as planned. This is sort of like that question that you get in a job interview, like, what is your greatest weakness? And you try to think of the thing that doesn't sound like an actual weakness. It's like, well, that counts as a weakness, but I can turn it into, like, I'm really detail-oriented, and sometimes that means that I'm, So I'm going to go that route. It's something that didn't go so well that I was able to turn into a thing that went well. One of the things that our organization struggled with and are still, behind in trying to settle on our reputation for our journals program was the amount of time it was taking for papers to get through the process. And I actually started working as the production manager for the journals back in 2000. And it was not uncommon to have papers from the time they were submitted to the time they were finally published to take 3 years or so. We made a lot of changes as an organization with online submission systems and reporting and all of that. And we took out all the time that we could take out from our own standpoint. There was no more mailing. There was no more faxing, everything was electronic, and that cut a huge chunk of time out. But we hadn't really addressed those human problems when it comes to your turnaround time. And so, we were taking a look. When you talk to the editors at the editorial board meetings, they would all say, oh, God, it takes so long, and if we could only make it faster. And so, of course, I'd say, well, where's the problem? And they'd say, oh, those reviewers, they take forever. And I would go back to the editorial coordinators and say, are we having to send tons of reminders to reviewers? Like, the reviewers are the least of our problems. So we knew that, there needed to be a little more information. But, I sort of, for our annual editors workshop, like I was mentioning before, we put this on as a major agenda item. Like, we really need to do something about this. And there had been initiatives in the past to try to do something to decrease the amount of time it was taking to get papers through review. And they were basically ignored. So, I tried to explain to the editors that we don't have to give reviewers as much time as we're giving, which at the time was 45 days to review a manuscript. And there are things that we can do to try to speed things up. And we had, some analytics for them to take a look at. And they did what they normally do, which is ask a few questions and talks amongst themselves. And basically, they hated every idea we came up with. Everything that we suggested, they're like, no, that's not going to work. No, reviewers definitely need 45 days. No, I can't ask my associate editors to work faster. They won't do it. And at the end of that discussion, my boss had been sitting next to me, and I turned to him, and he said, how do you feel about what just happened? And I said, I don't feel really good about it. And he said, you should be really pissed off. And I said, okay. So over the next year, we did a lot of data analysis. So that was the failure. Obviously, I failed to convince them that this was something that they actually had control over and that they needed to take action on. So we turned to the data and started doing some really granular reports to show them exactly where things were getting stuck in the process. And to this day now, we give them reports twice a year that show them how much time every little step in that turnaround time is taking. And they can see clearly that the reviewers are actually performing in exactly the time frame that we give them. It's the editors and the associate editors that are taking a long time to bother looking at the manuscript, assigning the reviewers, making the decisions once the reviews are in. So once we started providing them with that data, what can they do? They can't say the data's wrong. Well, some of them did say the data was wrong, but we went back and said, no, it's actually real data. And so now, after a few years of continually providing this information to them. Some of the things that have come out of it are that editors have realized that it's very important for them to use their associate editors, that they were causing a backlog themselves because they were overworked, that they needed to log into the systems more often, that doing it on a Friday night and having your AE come in on Monday morning to 75 papers to process is not the most efficient way of doing things. But that, our authors deserve better. We could show them some information about how many author queries we were getting about late manuscripts, things that we were tracking. And they're authors, so they kind of know how that goes. And, over the course of the last few years, we've taken nearly a month off of our time to first decision, which I'd like to say it's more than a month. But now we're also able to say, look, the reviewers are actually doing the review when they get the reminder. They don't wait until the due date. And we've always sent pre-reminders. So when the editor said they didn't want to make the time shorter, I moved the 5-day pre-reminder to a 10-day pre-reminder. And the reviewers did their reviews 10 days faster. And then I could say, hey, look, the reviewers are doing awesome. They're actually doing this in 35 days. And let's make it 35 days. Okay. Then we push that reminder up to 25 days. Now we're changing the review time to 30 days. So using sort of the information, I tried to appeal to them as you're an author, you don't like to be treated like that, you want papers to move faster through the system. Failed, totally failed. But if I could show them the data and actually give them the numbers, and now they know they're getting the data twice a year, that I'm sharing it with the rest of their editorial boards, that I'm giving it to their oversight committees. There's no hiding from it. It has sort of upped the game, and it's not that they're necessarily doing better. They weren't convinced that everybody in the whole ecosystem could do better, but we've been able to prove them wrong. So that's my fail/success.
Thank you, Angela. I bet you that none of you remember July 10th, 2010. What you were doing or what happened on that particular day, but I will not forget what happened. That was a Monday, by the way, sunny. I'd just gotten back from vacation. It was a great vacation. And you have that post-vacation glow, and you wonder how long it's going to last. Well, it lasted about 10 minutes. For me to find out that we had what is now known as the data crash. And over the weekend, our IT department, or elements of it, were basically taking huge amounts of data from an old server and transferring it to new servers, which is a good thing to do. And there was a glitch at some point, and I'm not a techie, so I can't tell you exactly what went wrong. But in a situation like that, if there's a failure, at least you have the stuff backed up, if you have it backed up. And that was the problem. They thought that things were being backed up for the prior 6 months, but in actuality they were not. So 6 months of data were lost, gone, just gone. And I want to say most of it, of course I'm biased, but most of it was publications data. Most of it were the papers, the manuscripts in various forms at various parts of the review process. Gone. Reviews, gone. Gone. So.
Were they gone?
They were gone. I just want to make that clear. And it was one of those things where this is where shock is an adaptive thing. Because you don't really understand immediately what the full ramifications of this will be, and it slowly unfolds, and worst case scenarios become reality and all that kind of stuff. And if you can think of it as dropping a glass pitcher on the floor, you're going to have some big pieces, and you can pick up those big pieces, it's not a problem. The problem are the shards. And if you can think of all those papers that were affected, about 1,500 papers. They were all different. Every shard is different, and every paper was in a different state. We knew what that state was. That's one thing we did know. We also had some of the technical editors and copy editors had papers in process, so those papers were okay. Some of the papers were still at our compositor, so we had those. Some were at our online host, so we could save some of them, but a lot of them we could not save. And I will say, so this is, you know, if you were going to script the way that you could most undermine an enterprise, you couldn't have scripted this any more devastatingly than what happened. But what we found out immediately was that our executive director had our backs right off the bat. And then it was important for us to realize, first of all, this was an accident. Nobody planned to do this. And it was another department. You know, it wasn't publications, it was our IT department. But we knew that the consequences were going to fall straight on us. And we decided to be as completely transparent and open to our customers and our community about what had happened, what we're going to do to fix it. And we found out that people rallied around us. By and large, almost without exception, our governing council rallied around us, our publications commission rallied around us, our authors rallied around us. It was really great, and I so appreciate that. But what it also did was it made me so proud of the publication staff that I have. You have a good staff. You can get a sense of that. But you really don't know how good a group of people is until something bad happens. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do this, but if it does happen, and you have the kind of people that we have in publications and throughout the society, but I'm talking about publications, you know, a lot of times when things like this happen, you have people running for the door. Nobody ran for the door. Everybody stayed, everybody pitched in, people were working overtime. We got through it, and we're not only back where we were before that incident, we're way beyond it. And the bonding that's taken place as a result of that is absolutely priceless. So that's taking something that wasn't planned, and certainly was a mechanical failure, and failure on other levels as well. But ultimately seeing, when you look back at it, giving you a new perspective on just how great your people are.
Well, I would like to say that if you've heard the saying, if you build it, they will come. Well, not always. I don't know how many of you have mini sites or have decided that we'll create this content and everyone will come and want to read all that information. I think sometimes you really have to assess ideas and make sure that they are relevant and that they work for your organization and will work for your end users and be successful. Sometimes, you know, you launch into a project that sounds really good and you don't really quite know the amount of work and time that's going to be involved and the personnel that's going to be involved and the additional tagging and everything else, and the maintenance. You build 20 mini sites, you're going to have a lot of maintenance on those sites. So, you know, I think that, you know, in the past, we've done a lot of building and structuring and figuring out that this would be fabulous. I will create these communities. Instead of creating separate publications, you'll create a community by to creating new publications. But you know, it depends on what you consider success. If some people are going to it and they find that that content is a great place to get that content, that's good, but is it worth the effort? So I would say from past experience that we went into something and moved pretty quickly, and the value was not quite as high as we had hoped. So.
Well, at ACS, we really don't have failures. We just have incorrect hypotheses. Well, I'd say there's an area where I think overall, again, as an industry, where I think we're struggling. I'm not sure if we're failing yet, but And that's really understanding the ecosystem around text and data mining, how to support it, how to control it, how to take advantage of it, how to value it. These are all things which I think we should have been looking at more seriously and more resolutely a couple of years ago, and spent more time speaking with the researchers that are doing it versus the people that are lobbying for it. Because we really do need to understand the possibility it represents to us as a business as well as to the scholarly community as large. I'd say from a personal standpoint, when I was a publisher at McGraw-Hill, or a division of McGraw-Hill, my manager, boss at the time, Ted Narden, who many of you may know, introduced me to a publishing maxim of ride your winners hard. There's a corollary to that, which is, shoot and bury your wounded quickly before they stink. And I was with a division that had gone through several boom and bust cycles. And I was very proud of the division. I was very proud of our publishing record. And I was intensely proud and supportive of the people that I had brought on board, the authors that we'd attracted. And when that environment, the computer book environment, really took, I think, a terminal nosedive, I spent 3 years protecting and fighting a kind of bloody retreat from Moscow to prevent the inevitable conclusion. And really, I look back, and those were 3 wasted years for my employer, my employees, and myself, because I hadn't recognized the future. And I think it's a hard thing to do in publishing, a hard thing to do in life, but is to recognize when you are failing and to take the decisive action that you need to, even if it's painful, to recover, reinvent, and move on. And I think those are lessons you have to learn because you're going to step on that rake one way or another through a career.
I have a really hard time talking about failure, so that's a question for my therapist, which I'll pose when I get home. So I'm going to ignore the idea of failure, but I'd rather sort of focus on what Jenny Lawton, again, quoting her this morning, sort of talked about, which is, I think she had this quote, to be a dynamic athlete, you have to fall on your butt a lot. And that experiential thing, having the experience of just trying, which will involve not succeeding, but also will involve succeeding. That's what I would rather sort of think about and rather ignore the idea of failure, but just the experience. So that's a sort of a general point. I'll talk about 3 things very quickly. Actually, I was struck this morning also at the Mind the Gap session on the role of women, the roles that women have in publishing, that I think a failure, probably not just our organization, but many organizations, is really to think about effectively diversity, gender diversity, and really sort of encourage the role of women both at all levels up to the senior level. And I think we've all failed at that. Perhaps we're improving, but I'd certainly, and that same goes for ethnic minority diversity. I mean, I look at our organization and we've failed miserably. I mean, it's absolutely appalling. So, in terms of turn those things around, we're hiring at the moment for a particular position, and Laurie Sprague, I was talking to her, she's the Director of Marketing, Sales, and Membership Services. I was saying, look, we need to make sure that we have more women applying to this job. So we were actually sort of being almost affirmative in our action. It's a small thing. It's a tiny thing in a way. But just at least bearing those things in mind is a way to try and correct those failures. Another thing is that, we're a society. We're not a big corporate publisher. We are sort of excluded from the big deal, really. So you could argue, I don't know if that's a failure as such, but it's certainly a failure to play in the big leagues. But we have worked on that and sort of turned it around, and we have a wonderful, for the Math SciNet and other things, we have proved very successful with our consortia deals, and we have these wonderful relationships with librarians, which has been basically leveraged into other things that we then do with libraries, whether it be ask their advice on all manner of things, committees, and so forth. So we've turned what we think is this failure to really sort of be able to penetrate in that way into a success. And the third quick thing is, I mean, as is everyone, I'm sure, we have ebooks. We have very robust ebook collections, DRM-free, perpetual access, no fees, etc., for libraries. But we also thought at one point, well, let's make sure that we can sell our ebooks to individuals. And the first thing we did was and this is, with math, this is before any sense of conversion to HTML and so on, which we're working on now. But the PDF, we went through Google Play. Well, that was an utter failure. I mean, you can count on one hand the number of sales we've had through Google Play. But we're trying to turn that around. We're working with Tisra to develop a really interesting and robust sort of ebook store and ebook delivery platform. We have the promise of all sorts of cool stuff I think we're going to be able to do with ebooks going forward, interesting ways, things that we can do specially for members, and so on. So again, that's an example of, I think, a failure that we've taken and turned into something that I think we will see great promise with.
So many things to choose from. Our organization tries a lot of things, but they don't all work well, and I think that's a good thing. I think you've got to fail at some things. That you learn lessons from it. You got to see, you've got to stretch for something, and the best home run hitters strike out a lot. So you've got to strike out sometimes. But a couple of things come to mind. Anybody here remember, or not remember, do you know the product Up to Date? It's a clinical medical tool. Like, I think every medical professional on the planet uses it. So when it was in its infancy, they approached us and our organization and said, we're looking for content partners who can provide content. And we just struck some deals with some other groups. We were with Silver Platter, which obviously everybody remembers that name. We were with Ovid, we were with MD Consult, and so we decided, I don't think we're going to do that. And then it turned out to be the one tool that every clinical medical professional uses. That our members come to us all the time and go, "How come you guys aren't working with Up to Date?" It's like, should we tell them? Should we not tell them? But what it kind of taught us is we really need to had to take our time to assess opportunities. That was an opportunity that we really missed, and it's one of those things, but we've had some other home runs. The other thing is, like Nancy was talking about, with the content not necessarily getting it. We had the opposite, actually, that happened to Robert. So we have some board review books that are incredibly popular with individuals studying for the boards. That makes a lot of sense. And we had this brilliant idea that we have the journal platform. We're getting all kinds of traffic on the journal, like millions of visitors to a journal when we only have 17,000 members. So we thought, wow, there's a lot of interest in our clinical content. So I bet if we took those ebooks and we put them up there on the journal platform and integrated it so that people would become exposed to the book content, it would drive lots of traffic and sales and chapter by chapter sales and all those things, and no, it did nothing. I think we maybe had 10 sales to an institution. We thought that the institutions would pick up on it. We had some of our sales partners trying to sell it, and we just couldn't sell the things to an institution to save our lives. And we'd invested money in the platform and all that, and it just didn't work out. We did not quite foresee how the market would deal with this product, and that was our failure. What we learned from it is we need to do better analysis going forward.
Just have one follow-up question for Ken, which is, are the same folks that do your server backups the folks that do your domain registration? Just kidding.
Oh, man.
That's cruel, Michael.
Just saying.
I'll pay you the $5 later.
We do recruitment, if you're looking at just kidding. Well, I want to make sure we get some questions from the audience. I think there's some microphones that are going to be circulating. Are there microphones circulating? Microphones circulating up there, folks?
Michael, while you're waiting for questions, I want to I'll impart one more thing to talk about that that I'm proud of for our organization. That is, we've really rebranded and worked toward the strength of our journal, which is called CHEST. We really believe strongly that should the medical publishing market completely fail, we are in a unique position to make the transition to porn. So that's what we're very proud of.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, questions from that note. Questions from the audience.
Maybe where all that traffic came from.
Questions from the audience. Any questions? There must be one question. No questions from the audience. Okay, well, you think of your... Oh, Kavi's got a question.
Just because no one else is asking a question. Just a comment on the redesign of journal. I just want to... it's a one-time sort of exercise that you do, and I think we don't do enough in the scholarly publishing world of redesigning or branding a journal. There are people, and I know the people who did your redesign. I think it's worth doing. It's a one-time. It doesn't cost that much, but for years you have a good-looking brand that people recognize, and I think we should look at that more. That's just a comment.
Any comments on the comment?
No, I agree. We went through an entire
Annotation.
rebranding of our organization, and it was very difficult. We had a lot of old time. We've had the same look and logo since probably the 1950s, and it looked like it was from the 1950s. But a lot of our members, or leadership, were members in the 1950s, so they didn't want to let it go. And what ended up happening, we changed it, we modernized it, and we had a whole lot of people who said they hated it. They were writing to the president saying, "You've ruined us." And lo and behold, a couple of months later, people were like, this really looks good. They liked the new design. We've heard a lot of positive about it. It just, change is hard for people, and you can't be afraid to change. And I think you're right. You've got to update what you're doing. You just can't sit there and say, well, we've had this same tradition's nice, but at the same time, it's good to move forward.
So we recently redesigned just the covers of our journals, which were very dated, and now they're beautiful. But it went from having a white spine with dark type to these beautiful jewel colors that are on the covers that go all over the spine. And I got an email sent to me by one of the members who subscribes to the journal who said, these covers are terrible. They're just god-awful. The colors are just the worst thing ever. They look terrible on my shelf, but more importantly, I can't write notes on the spine. It's like, what? So he said there's nothing wrong with a white spine with black text. So he writes notes like page numbers of articles of interest instead of sticking a sticky note on it, or if it's a special issue on a topic, even though it says it's a special issue and what the topic is, he would make himself a little note on it. So that was I guess what we learned is that don't pay attention to the one guy that sends a weird email. I know.
I guess I'm going to take a bit of a contrarian view here. Don't get me wrong, I love good design, and my marketing team knows I spend a lot of time torturing them when they come with new designs and new covers for journals we launch. But in a world where our journals are increasingly consumed by the data as data objects, covers are thumbnails, except for the marketing launch of a new title. I guess I would be focusing more on usability and user experience than sort of the physical design, and potentially, I begin to question that concept of that branded experience of, if I look at an article, I can see this came from X journal. I'm wondering in a world where I see our researchers reading tens, if not hundreds of journals, and clearly moving in a world where they'll also be having machine-assisted reading, whether that's the most relevant thought today. So, just my opinion.
Great. Oh, see another question over there.
So I was speaking to a friend last night at a get-together, and we were talking about some of the speakers that have talked about millennials and how you attract millennials. How do you decrease the age of your membership? So how do you keep getting new members at a younger age? And I would just like to hear from you all if you've had any success at attracting millennials and just attracting younger members.
So this is something that's close to our heart right now, as I particularly I want to increase my chances of getting younger as opposed to being older, which is not going to happen, actually. But anyway, so we actually, I wrote a little bit on this in the Scholarly Kitchen recently. We basically realized that we didn't know anything about, not much, about what mathematicians really need. And we need to understand what the next generation of mathematicians do online. So what we have at least embarked on, and actually are pretty much, well, I'd say 3/4 of the way through it, we are doing these kind of, I'm doing inverted commas, it's ethnographic-like studies, interviewing mathematicians in situ in different types of institution, different types of mathematician, along from student through instructor and so on, especially interested in the younger variety, and how they look for content online. What do they do that involves their math research and teaching? So that's one way. You need to get out there and directly ask those questions. So that's what we're trying to do.
I would agree with Robert that you need to get out there and encourage all young people to join AMS. I heartily agree with that.
So we will give a free subscription to one of the meteorological science journals? Oh, carry on, sorry.
What we do is we have, and I'm sure all of us have this, a very, very low student membership rate, and that's not so difficult. What we find to be challenging is holding on. You know, it's pretty easy, in air quotes, it's easy to get a student to sign up for even a couple of years, whatever, at that very, very low rate. But then holding on to those potentially future members as they transition into the workforce, that's been our big challenge.
I'll say at this point, I'm in the publications group and not the membership side of ACS. And I'm not speaking at all now on representing any point of view held by ACS. As a matter of fact, I think the ACS membership team would probably think I'm a lower and probably anterior part of the anatomy than the chest when I express this point of view. But I think
everybody in here is going to have to sign an NDA. Right.
I think we're crazy to be focusing on the traditional version of membership, which is essentially a purchased membership. I think that's like a sports team focusing only on selling seats in their stadium. You limit your audience, and you, to a certain extent, don't take advantage of the fact that while you may have a fixed number right now of seats and season ticket holders, in our ecosystems we have an awful lot more fans and even guests that we should be trying to seek affiliation with. And fundamentally, certainly from ACS's, or looking at ACS's numbers, and probably reflects my inexperience in that I've only really seen ACS's numbers on the membership side. You know, the revenues we get from membership compared to the potential we would have for broadening our population and broadening our engagement with the market and other areas of interaction are the upside of changing the model is so apparent to me that I think we really need to look hard and take some bold steps.
Actually, I just wanted to add something else, because I don't know whether this is absolutely true or not, but there's a generational shift in what it means to become a member of anything, to vote, to belong. What the reasons are for that, I think, need further exploration, but I'm sure that that has some influence. It used to be that if you were a chemist, I mean, I was actually a chemist, and I joined the Royal Society of Chemistry, because that's what you do. That doesn't hold anymore. So we have to find out what are the real driving forces. There's probably a combination of what you can do for your community combined with a kind of what we call a WIFI idea, what's in it for me. but it's an important question.
All right, we have time for one last question. Over there, that's good, because if you didn't ask it, I was going to ask it.
Hi, my name is Cal Hashmani from ACS. My question is that you are...
Am I fired?
You are all business leaders of your respective society and organization. Since I come from IT world, my question is, has technology growth met your expectation, or do you feel it has not been up to mark and not met your expectation? Whether it has been relevant or irrelevant, any technology growth, how has it affected your areas of management?
Keeping up with technology. Oh, whomever. Robert, you look like you are.
I'll start. I mean, I'm actually a little. I don't think it's a question of the technologies are ahead of us, actually, and I think it's more a question of not being seduced by every technology that's there on the road in front of you, and sorting out. There was another quote, and I can't remember who had this quote this morning. Oh, no, it was actually Jenny Lawton again, who said, "You don't need to be first," or something along those lines. She said that being slow is actually sometimes the way to finish the marathon rather than rushing. So that's how I look at technology. There's masses of it, and it's very cool, a lot of it, but doesn't necessarily all apply immediately to us.
I think one of the things that's, for me, is disappointing in terms of, I think technology has moved forward quite a bit, but what I don't see is, I don't see enterprise-wide systems that solve all the issues of societies like ours. We're doing a lot of implementations of technology. We have an association management system, an AMS. We have a learning management system now, an LMS. We have a CMS to drive our website and to do some other things. We have a financial management system. We're about to get an HR module. We went through some technology things. I was talking to somebody here earlier today who had done a similar thing, started mapping out all the different types of systems that they had to do different things. And there was something like 35 different systems. And so, the fact that there's so much disparity and so much specialization as opposed to looking at what general society business does and coming up with something that works more universally, I think, is a disappointment. I'd like to see that happen. It'd be a lot easier to integrate things and break down silos and do things that cross the divisions of most of our organizations, which exist to educate people, but the book people and the journal people and the education people don't talk. And I think that we need some systems that will allow us to share what we're doing and find ways to integrate that.
I would say be careful what you wish for. I've been through several large-scale ERP introductions where the beauty that the Oracle salespeople or the SAP salespeople sell you of this complete end-to-end vision and a unified data warehouse, et cetera, and the cost and complexity of making that happen is almost a company-busting event where I think for us, one of the the challenge, but also the good news is we've been able to adopt new technologies asymmetrically and say, yes, we're going to take the submission system here and the Salesforce.com over here. And ultimately, we need to find ways to make them interact better. But it's allowed us to sort of find systems at almost the right point of need and maturity and adopt them aggressively without having to do the kind of big re-engineer the whole business, which, let's face it, most of us have never done that before, whether you're a junior copy editor or a CEO. That type of, let's redesign everything at once is an incredible stress in the business. I think the challenge we have, and it's caused by this sort of asymmetric adoption of technology rapidly, is that our data is really crap because in many cases we treat it differently in different systems. So our submission system, there are certain things that are really important when we accept a manuscript and when we collect data on the author. And there's some things which are just sort of incidental. It's nice to have, but it's not something which we're using as essentially a controlled field for business purposes. So it's nice to know that someone went to Harvard. It's not necessary for the submission to go forward to make that happen. Whereas if I'm giving my sales system a discount on an APC based on what university you're going to and tied to a subscription record, that accuracy of that data is very important. And we have a lot of non-normalized fields across the systems and a lot of different ways of treating the data. And it's very hard to get, I guess, that toothpaste back in the tube on the fly.
I would say, as with Steve, we have a lot of different systems, and it's getting them to talk with each other, as well as getting our departments to talk with each other. You have a tendency to work in silos, and we've really been working very hard to work with the education and the meetings, and it's not just the publications department. So it's not just the systems talking to each other, but it's the departments within your society.
Well, fantastic. Thank you all for staying to the very end on a Friday. Thank you to our esteemed panelists.
You're very funny.